loving it. So
With that, I think we've taken care of all the housekeeping. Whenever you're ready, you can start.
Good afternoon. On behalf of BLMW Consulting Firm, I'd like to thank you as a board of Roche for inviting us today to discuss off-label marketing. Before we get too far into what off-label marketing is and go into the details and why we're here in front of Roche Pharmaceuticals, I want to give a quick definition of off-label marketing. Off-label marketing is a practice in pharmaceuticals when a certain prescription drug, a certain product is marketed based on non-FDA approved indications or uses. So basically a company decides it can make a certain amount of money saying this drug can treat this, even though the FDA is saying actually it's only approved for this one use or these several uses. Christine will go a lot more in depth on what it is, why companies do it, but from now on that's what off-label marketing means. As you all know, several months ago you hired our consulting firm to look into this issue, figure out how to avoid the perils, and figure out how can Roche keep its hands clear and clean from these practices that have troubled many people, many companies within the industry. So that's where we're going from there. Before we get too in-depth, just want to introduce everyone within the firm. We have all four partners of BLMW Consulting here. We have Christine Mayasan. She is our pharmaceutical as well as our ethics subject matter expert. She has an emphasis in bioethics. We have BJ Wierig. He is our legal subject matter expert. We have Kyle Brown. He is our management and human resources subject matter expert. You have myself. I'm a financial subject matter expert. And as a consulting firm, we really focus on pharmaceutical issues and try and look at the legal, the financial, and the ethical issues involved with issues that are going on in the current atmosphere in the pharmaceutical industry. So you might be asking, why are we here? Why are we talking to Roche Pharmaceuticals? First of all, Roche Pharmaceuticals is a leading global pharmaceutical company. Second, last year, Roche Pharmaceuticals posted $47.35 billion in revenue. Lastly, and most importantly, is Roche has a culture, a values, mission to be an ethical company that really cares about the patients, the doctors, the whole pharmaceutical industry as a whole. And we think that getting involved in off-label marketing would have severe consequences, especially in terms of your ethical outlook and goals. And just to kind of highlight this, you have the Roche corporate citizenship statement, and it places respect on the individual both within and outside the organization, as well as strives to meet high standards of performance, business practices, policies, ethics, and results. So this is an issue that really drives home to, primarily the other ethics. So from here, we're going to have Christine kind of take over and go into what is off-label marketing.
Thank you, Terry. So at this point, you may have a few questions. Terry did an excellent job of explaining exactly what off-label marketing is. But to really understand it, we need to take a look at the role of the Food and Drug Administration. The role of the Food and Drug Administration is to protect, in a sense, the American public, and they do so by determining whether a drug is safe and effective for a particular use or indication. Throughout this presentation, we'll interchangeably be using use and indication. They mean the same thing, just don't want you to get confused about that. So pharmaceutical companies will promote a drug for a particular use or indication that the FDA has not approved, and that is off-label marketing. And in doing so, in practicing this off-label marketing, in a sense, the pharmaceutical companies are undermining the FDA by interfering with their role to protect the American public, also the commitment they have to protect the American public. How exactly do these pharmaceutical companies practice this off-label marketing? In any company, in any corporation, the major driving force is profitability. You want to generate that profit. And for the pharmaceutical industry, in order to generate that profit, you need to get that drug out into the market. And pharmaceutical companies need to get that drug out into the market as quickly as possible in order to make that money. They do so by what is called a narrow indication. A narrow indication is basically any any indication that easily gets the drug out to the market, it could be anything, just ensures that the drug gets out to the market as quickly as possible. It is not until this point that the pharmaceutical companies can start making a little bit of money, or a lot. So board of directors, you might be asking yourselves, why is this important to me? Why do I need to know about this? Well, more and more pharmaceutical companies are adopting this practice. And why not? It generates profit very quickly and very easily. But let's not forget here, it is illegal, it's extremely costly, as we'll be seeing later on, and it's unethical. So I'd like to present to you this case of Eli Lilly and Zyprexa. This will better help you understand the ramifications of this illegal and unethical practice of off-label marketing. In 1996, the FDA approved Zyprexa for 2 specific indications. These indications include schizophrenia and certain types of bipolar disorder. 3 years later, in September of 1999, the sales force at Eli Lilly started to market Zyprexa for indications not approved by the FDA. These include Alzheimer's, aggression, agitation, depression, dementia, hostility, and generalized sleep disorder. In doing so, they targeted 2 specific types of physicians: geriatricians, the physicians that treat the elderly, specifically geriatricians that work in extended care nursing homes. Also, they targeted primary care physicians. I want to make a point here that schizophrenia and bipolar disorder, the age of onset for these 2 disorders is early to mid-20s. There's really no reason to be in a nursing home. It's not just the sales force, though, that was involved in this. It was management, top down, that participated in this off-label marketing. Management encouraged their sales force to promote Zyprexa and encourage Zyprexa to be used by physicians for not only non-FDA approved indications, but also for the side effects that it created. They were promoting these as therapeutic benefits. They used 2 ad slogans to do so. First is called Viva Zyprexa. This was directed towards the primary care physicians. The slogan was an everyday agent for primary care. Next, 5 at 5. Well, what is 5 at 5, you may ask? 5 milligrams of Zyprexa at 5 p.m. This was targeted towards the geriatric patients. This would help with sleep disorders. It's commonly known that as you get a little bit older, it's harder to fall asleep. Many elderly patients have sleep disorders. And so the sales force was marketing this particular drug, which the FDA indicated for schizophrenia and bipolar disorder for non-FDA approved indications. The last side effect I'd like to mention is weight gain. They were also marketing this as a therapeutic benefit to maintain weight. Again, which population has difficulty maintaining weight? Can anyone guess? The elderly. At this point, it's important to point out something very important. It is illegal to market off-label, but it's not illegal to prescribe off-label. That is at the doctor's discretion. And in knowing this, Eli Lilly took advantage.
Next, we'd like to talk about some of the legal ramifications that befell Eli Lilly, since some of those legal ramifications will also have a significant effect on Roche if Roche chooses to engage in these same marketing tactics, marketing campaign. What happens is, at Eli Lilly, there was 4 sales reps, and these reps saw what was going on with these illegal marketing campaign, and they blew the whistle. And it's called the qui tam lawsuit. The qui tam suit is a Latin term, and it means on behalf of the king and of themselves. So basically, what they do is they blow the whistle, and they're highly incentivized to do so, because a qui tam lawsuit means that you get a share in the damages when the federal government sues. Typically what happens is the federal government has been defrauded somehow, and so they file this suit, and then they reclaim some of the money that was lost because of the fraud, and then they give a portion of that to those who blew the whistle. So they're highly incentivized people within corporations pharmaceutical corporations specifically, that have high incentive to blow the whistle. In this case, there's 4 sales reps who blew the whistle, and what happened was there was criminal charges and civil charges brought against Eli Lilly. The criminal charge was specifically violation of the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act. Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act specifically says that it is illegal to market prescription drugs for off-label purposes, for those purposes that are not specifically enumerated by the FDA as they verify the drugs and bring them to market. Also, there were civil charges. These civil charges were brought by state Medicaid offices, federal Medicaid offices. The point is to, what happens is the doctors are prescribing this drug not for a non-FDA approved indication, and then they send those claims to Medicaid, and that's a form of fraud since that's not what the FDA said is okay, is sanctioned. And so the government sues, Medicaid sues, state Medicaid sue, and the federal Medicaid office got about $300 million of punitive damages on that, or compensatory damages rather, and the state Medicaid offices got about $400 million as well in compensatory damages. So what are the implications for Roche here? The legal implications are that there's a high likelihood of getting caught because whistleblowers are highly incentivized. Also, it's very difficult, I think, for when you have a board and they're trying to work out their budget, and you're saying, okay, we probably need to set aside this much money for legal purposes this year, for lawsuits and things that may come up. However, in this case, Eli Lilly was fined punitive and compensatory damages in the upwards of $1.45 billion, which is one of the largest ever in history. I don't think they could have taken that into account prior to engaging in these things. They never probably thought that that was a possibility for them. So those are some of the things that might also adversely affect Roche if this isn't taken seriously.
So let's talk about what every business person likes to talk about. How does this affect your bottom line? How does this affect your net income, your profits? How does it translate into a loss? As BJ said minutes ago, there are significant costs to going to court on these issues. He mentioned $1.45 billion. It's a lot of money that most companies don't have sitting around to just throw at a problem. If you look here, we have the income statement of Eli Lilly. This is in 2008. In the third quarter, you can see this top circle shows the area in which they had to record these court costs, the legal fees, the lawyers, the payouts, the settlements, everything associated with breaking the law through off-label marketing practices. So you can see in that third quarter, they had a loss of roughly $500 million. I'm not sure about you, but most stakeholders, most stockholders, boards, directors do not like to see a net loss of $500 million, especially when in 2007 you had a net income of roughly $3 billion. That's a huge percentage. And you look at year to year, 2008, they posted a roughly $2 billion loss. Part of that was due to their off-label marketing practices. If you're looking at, you started at $3 billion, you ended up at a loss of $2 billion. Over a year, you're losing $5 billion, which I'm sure upset a lot of stockholders. And it's not completely fair to say that that whole loss is because of their off-label marketing practices. They also acquired a company called Imclone for roughly $4.7 billion. But the difference between those two situations is when you buy an R&D company, you're investing in your future. There's a net present value of that investment. You're hoping in the future you'll be able to have additional revenues from this area, from that investment. The roughly $1.5 billion that they spent due to their off-label marketing practices, they're never going to recoup any of that money. If anything, that's going to hurt them more financially because of the negative PR, just a lost reputation for following that. So you might be saying, okay, this is maybe a one-off occasion. Maybe this is just Eli Lilly just doing something not smart. But the fact of the matter is this is an epidemic in the pharmaceutical industry. You can see, probably know some of these names, Pfizer, Upjohn, AstraZeneca. All these companies have gotten in trouble throughout the years. And this is a recent problem. This most recent is 2010, you have 2009, 2008. There are companies that slowly the government is picking up on these policies, and whether it's whistleblowers, whether It's doctors, someone's finding out that they're following these. And as you can see, you know, the payouts are ranging, but you can't forecast those payouts. You might say $313 million isn't a lot of money, it's worth it for the revenues. But I can guarantee you $1.5 billion makes you rethink that cost-benefit analysis. So why is this important to Roche? Bottom line is, if you follow these practices, financially you will get burned because you can't afford to pay out $1.5 billion. Finally, the question you might be asking yourself is, knowing these potential financial costs, why would you promote off-label? And the answer is, there's a cost-benefit analysis. Because oftentimes companies do a cost-benefit analysis, they try and weigh it, but there's so much of importance put on additional revenues that you can't put into context really what the costs are going to be. I'm sure Eli Lilly had no idea that they'd be paying out $1.5 billion. They knew they were breaking the law, but it was worth it because of the additional revenues. So obviously, the first issue is they couldn't predict what the cost of the legal battle would be. Secondly, how do you predict the lost sales due to PR? You know, it's very difficult to forecast, okay, our sales are going to go down by this much when our name is printed on the front of the newspaper saying we follow these unethical, illegal practices. And then last, you have to ask, what are the ethics of doing this kind of cost-benefit analysis? What are the ethics of these off-market, off-label practices?
Now, Terry talked about the financial implications of the cost-benefit analysis, but let's look at the ethical implications. Can we really put a dollar amount of life and the health of a human being? If we go back and take a look at Zyprexa, one of the side effects is weight gain. Increased weight gain, there's a great chance of having obesity. And with obesity come diseases such as diabetes, hyperglycemia. This is not just an in and out type of disease, it's lifelong. They're conditions that you have to deal with for the rest of your life. Is that something that you want to do to your patients? Is that something that you can consciously live with day in and day out? In addition, these doctors are paid ludicrous amounts of money to promote and to use these drugs. What happens is the pharmaceutical companies will market these drugs for an off-label indication to these doctors. The doctors will be extremely happy with the outcome, and by word of mouth, it will spread from doctor to doctor to doctor. Lastly, should drugs be marketed for off-label indications when there are other drugs out there in the market that are indeed FDA approved for that particular indication? We'll take a look now at a few examples of some drugs. We have Zyrtec, which is an allergy medication. We have Valium, which is an anxiolytic, helps with anxiety disorders. We have Zyprexa, which we just discussed. These three have something in common. They're prescription drugs where the side effect is sedation. On your right-hand side, we'll see Ambien, we have Lunesta, we have Sonata. What do these three have in common? These are three drugs that are indeed FDA approved for sedation. If there are already drugs out there that are FDA approved for sedation, it only leads me to believe one thing, that Eli Lilly specifically, and any pharmaceutical company that invests in off-label marketing, do this for one particular reason, and that is to generate profits. But let's consider this. What about the lives? What about the health of the patients? A lot of these pharmaceutical companies, they neglect to look at the ethical implications that practices like this may have.
Thank you, Christine. So hopefully we've opened your eyes to what Terry characterized as an epidemic that's running rampant through your industry. We've given you a case study from one of your top competitors, also a big 5 pharma company. Now we're going to move into our recommendations. Now these are recommendations that you can immediately implement that will have an effect on the way that you run your business and the way that you sell your pharmaceuticals and the way that you essentially will create your revenue. Now these are going to be some preemptive that you can implement on the back end. Audit, so continuously discovering and getting to the bottom of if these practices are a one-time thing or are in fact a culture. And then also some reaction. If this is discovered to be within your company, these are going to be steps that you can take to ensure that that is stopped and that you can move into a culture of ethically selling your prescription medication. So preemptively, First and foremost, we have to have some type of a training program that is going to instill in your sales force, in your sales managers, in your C-level managers, all the way up and all the way down, that this is illegal, that it can hurt you, that it can hurt you professionally, personally, as well as your company as a whole and all of your shareholders. For this to be effective, it has to be a top-down. It has to start right here. It has to start in your C-suite. It has to go all the way down to your brand new sales force. Next, after this is complete, we recommend that you have them sign an employment contract that's going to spell out the expectations that there's going to be a zero-tolerance policy. This is going to acknowledge that they have received the training and that they do understand that implications for them personally, professionally, and for the company as a whole. Our third preemptive action, as I'm sure you've all gotten to the bottom right of the slide, is kind of a hot button debate in this industry as well as many other sales-driven industries. And that is going to be just to discourage rogue marketers or rogue salespeople, eliminate the commission-based sales in the pharmaceutical industry. We believe that Roche, as a top 5 pharmaceutical company, can be an industry leader, can be a first mover in this particular set. And as a result, your shareholders will reward you. What this is going to do is it's going to disincentivize unethical sales practices. And it's also going to move your management team from sitting back on their laurels and just using commission as a sales motivator and actually have them manage their business essentially by using different forms of performance management. In order to do this, we also believe that you still need to remain competitive in your industry as far as salary. So we recommend that you do raise your base salary in order to continue to attract your top talent and your top salespeople. And now we're not saying that you have to completely eliminate any kind of recognition for salespeople, but only to do that in a way that's not going to encourage the unethical sales of your drugs. As far as an ongoing action that you can take, we recommend that you institute some type of a marketing ethics board, some type of an oversight committee, specifically for off-label marketing. And basically what this is going to do is it's going to be an entity that can impartially hear any kind of complaints, whether they're from salespeople, whether they're from management, whether they're from doctors that have had an encounter with one of your representatives that they feel is being too pushy and is, in a sense, off-label marketing in their office. They also need to have the ability to internally resolve these issues before they get out, before they have to talk to a lawyer, before they have to have the federal government come in and slap you back down with a $1.45 billion settlement. They also need to have direct communication with you. If it's found that this is a culture, that this is an ongoing situation, it needs to be dealt with from the top down. And essentially the goals, as you can already imagine, are going to be to eliminate the off-label marketing. It's going to improve your corporate image, and it's going to alleviate any kind of problem in the future, such as Eli Lilly had to deal with their settlement. As far as reaction, really we only have one recommendation, and that's a zero-tolerance policy. If you have a salesman that is found to be doing this, zero tolerance. Sales manager that's encouraging or allowing this, zero tolerance. Even a middle or high-level manager that's allowing it to happen or even encouraging it to happen, needs to be a zero-tolerance policy. Roche's culture does not and should not promote this type of unethical behavior. And really the rationale that we came up with for this severe punishment is going to be back to your corporate citizenship statement. And that's going to be respect for the individual, both inside and outside of your organization, both your shareholders and your employees, as well as your customer, which are going to be those patients that are going to be taking your drugs. And the corporate citizenship policy specifically states that they're meeting high standards not only in their business practices, but in their ethics and their results.
So on behalf of BLM&W, I would just like to thank the board of Roche today for inviting us to share research or recommendations. We look forward to working with you in the future to help you implement our recommendations and really help develop a compliance system that does not allow Roche to get sucked into the temptation of off-label marketing. Ideally, we want you to avoid the perils of off